Good morning, everyone. I've been tossing and turning for many hours about something I said in yesterday's video. And I was introducing Ben to you, and I mentioned that he was the only glimmer of brightness, or whatever I said, in the Philadelphia Pen Show. And that's not true. There are a number of people that I saw at the Philadelphia Pen Show that I like and that make me smile. And there was one guy that I hadn't seen for maybe 30 years, and he's still around, still alive. Many of the people I knew 30 years ago are not alive. But he was still alive, and he had his son with him, who I don't even know if he was married when I knew him way back when. But, and there were a lot of collectors I hadn't seen for a while. But the show itself was a little less fun for me because I didn't have money to spend on pens. Even though I did spend money on pens, I did not do it relaxedly. I did it knowing full well that I shouldn't be doing this. But Ben, the person that I spoke to yesterday, was different from all of these other people. Everyone else that was there was old and jaded, or young and jaded before their time by decades. But Ben was, he was just in awe of all of these pens, and I missed seeing that in other people, and I miss seeing it in myself. I walk into a room full of pens and my eyes don't glaze over as much as they used to, and I yawn far too early because I shouldn't. I should retain my innocence. Yeah, right. How's that going to happen? Get the time machine out. But anyway, Ben was looking at some old pens and had 6 or 7 pens, and I found out in his life at that point they were all modern. And I don't know modern pens, but I was able to explain to him what I felt the old pens had that modern pens don't. And I also really enjoy talking with him because not only does he write, but he draws with pens. And most of the people at a pen show that use pens use them really only for writing, not for drawing. So I enjoyed talking with him. But at the pen show, I did speak to a man that wants to start up a store with writing instruments, and the joy of writing, about actually using pens to write letters. He had a table set up where you would write a letter to your congressman, I think. I don't know how it worked out, but you were supposed to write this. He was asking people to write a little postcard to I think to the mayor or the representative. I don't know. You'll have to ask him. Coffee. But I enjoyed talking to him. I enjoyed talking to a number of people. There was a German woman who I met the year before, and she and I sat down and laughed and giggled and talked almost entirely about non-pen related things. We talked about knitting and crocheting and knots and jewelry and German language and music and just all sorts of crazy things that had nothing to do with pens. And that's what's fun about going to a pen show sometimes, is your mind goes away from the actual pens. Anyway, so when I said that everyone else wasn't fun, I was lying yesterday. Ben was, however, unique because of his newness to the realm of fountain pens in such quantity, I guess. So here we have, Ben yesterday asked me to explain to him the value of or reason for overfeeds. Excuse me. And the only overfeeds that I was able to lay my hands on in my collection were some Swan Pens. And these were the 4 early eyedrop fill swans that I brought out to use to demonstrate to him what they were and how they wrote differently. And because of the setup that I had, it was hard to see what we were talking about. So an overfeed is a piece of gold, in this case, or a piece of hard rubber in in this case, where the feed, and sometimes there's a feed underneath as well, a feed on top, and it was used to provide maybe more ink than the feeds that they had earlier. I don't really quite know the reason. You do the research yourself on that. My initial thought was that an overfeed might hinder the ability for the pen to flex, and I believe that that's true to some degree, and I'm happy to hear your comments on that. But I was in a swan state of mind, and I brought out some other swans in my collection, and I'll just talk about swans for a minute. We all have regret stories. Why did I sell that pen? And one of my regret stories is a pen that looks something like this, except it was a larger pen. And I regret selling it because it had, I think, the best fountain pen nib that I've ever had on a pen, and I sold it. And you're thinking, Pierre Gustafson, of all people, why would you possibly sell it? And I normally, when I sell a pen, even if it's a Skyline with teeth marks, I try to make sure that the pen is ending up in the hands that it belongs in. And if that particular pen does not belong in that person's hand, I will try to find the pen that does. And in this case, the man would come over to my house, and he would try that pen, and he would say, when you want to sell this, let me know. And I'd say, well, it's not for sale because it is everything I like. It's sterling silver. It has a sterling silver section. It has a beautiful nib. I can't possibly sell it to you. And I'm just looking at this engraving on this one. It's sort of clumsily cute. you see this sort of, quote, calligraphy done by people that don't know how letters work. It's the E that is the culprit, though the other letters are, the E has sort of, it has wide horizontal lines when it should have narrow ones. It's a block E in the middle of Roman R and a D. Anyway, I got in the mail a letter from him, and it was about 8 feet long. Well, I'm exaggerating. It was maybe 3 feet long, and it was all folded up. A piece of paper about that tall and 3 feet wide, and it's beautiful calligraphy. Dear Peer. I don't even think it started that way. I think it just said, I don't know what else to do other than this, or words to that effect. And all the way at the end of this rolled up sentence was a blank check, signed, written out to me. And I knew what it was for. And I said, okay, you can buy it. And I did not write it out for $1 million. I filled in the number that I would have sold it if I didn't like it as much as I did. I sold it for the value it was at the time, plus maybe $50 or something, for just because I had them by the short and curlies. Now it was really an amazing pen, and the reason I sold it was I never used it because I was afraid I would break it. And he is someone who would not break it, and he is someone who understands pens and their nibs, especially flexible ones, better than I do. Can you imagine such a creature? Watch on my channel, I have him describing pens and their nibs mainly under the playlist TED Talks. He's a very talented artist and calligrapher, and he just immediately gets right to the meat of the matter in a very artistic and creative way. I think you'll like how he describes pens. So he has the pen. He, too, is almost afraid to use it, though he does use it. He brings it out to drive around the block. I don't think he goes to the grocery store with it yet. He does somehow take it on the highway. He does, make its swoopy lines. And I asked him to bring it here so I could touch it one more time. And I put it in my hand, and I wrote a little tiny bit with it, and I gave it back to him, and I said, I'm going to break it. If I knew I would never break it, it could be the only pen I wouldn't use it for drawing, but it could be the only pen I'd use for calligraphy, because it just did almost everything that a pen should do. Swan nibs, in general, are very good, though they're not always flexible. And they have a really nice bouncy flex to them, and I think part of it is because that they made nibs during the dip pen era, maybe Todd Company, and their nibs are just they kept that nibsmith on the payroll for a long time, and they knew their secrets, and they were able to make it go. So I thought this was a gold pen, but I can see that it's silver in the light of day. One of my customers, when I was a waiter at a restaurant. One of my customers knew that I liked fountain pens, and he presented me with a pen just like this, except it was solid gold. A pen of his that he got when he was a child. And that's in a different drawer, I guess. I thought this was the gold one. I thought that would be the story I was going to tell. So let me just make some blanket statements about Swan Pens. These are some of them. They're pens that I don't normally think of when I think of, a pen that I'm going to take out in my pocket. And why, I don't know, but I don't. And maybe I need to change that. In general, I have a feeling about certain pen companies. Waterman pens are old-fashioned in the sense of your grandfather being old-fashioned. What do grandfathers do that makes me think they'd be old-fashioned? Maybe they would take a stick of gum and break it in two, and just use half of it because they grew up in the Depression and would know. I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to buy another pack of gum someday, so I don't need all of it. I'll just have half. There's a certain old-fashionedness about these pens to me. I think it probably has to do with those two little rivets. Maybe that's part of it. They showed the work that went into them. Schaefer pens are always big, masculine, conservative banker types to me, even if they're ladies' pens. They're not female, they're just men in drag. There's something that's just very masculine about all Schaefer pens. Only when they made the script cert did they allow a dame into the factory. Now, there was something about those pens, because it feels like your lipstick. Maybe that was the thing that finally broke the mold. Parker pens, I think they're almost always masculine as well. And I think that's because of their clip and the fact that it's so beautifully manufactured, and the clip is held on to by... Clip is essentially a washer with a thing sticking out of it. Didn't require rivets. It didn't require any sort of weird inner cap thing like the Swan clips have. So what is it about Swans that I could say? What's a blanket statement I could say about all Swans? Well, they're conservative in a different way in my mind. They're sort of conservative in the Catholic religion kind of way. There's a lot of show and a lot of glitz going on. High church Catholic. They're not even Episcopalian, but they're not pedophiliac Catholic priests. They're just devout Catholic priests, maybe. I don't know what I'm saying. Maybe they're just the cardinals, the innocent, the guiltless cardinals, which maybe there aren't any in the Catholic Church. But there's something conservative about them, but not, I don't know, not in a political way. And they're not just old-fashioned like Grandpa. There's this feeling of pride in the tradition of the olden days. And that's just the feeling I get from all of these. It may be the gold band at the top and the bottom of the cap. It might be their clip that has this strength to it that even the Waterman clip with its rivets don't seem as strong to me. There's just something about the tension that holds this thing in place underneath. I guess I know sort of how it works. It has these two grooves, slits in the cap, and the clip goes down and it sort of pinches down like this, like a big fat stapler, and then it's shoved into place by the inner cap. And there's something that's really neat about that. Swan self-filling pen, Maybe Todd and Company, New York. Eternal. See the name, the word eternal. Not lifetime. Eternal is eternity. That's the Catholic. You know how long eternity is? Well, it's longer than that. And this thing, this little chain and imprisoned pen, its little chatelaine thing, isn't this sublime in its simplicity? Just, it's a black pen. This is made in England, this one. And it fits in its own little holster with chains that go jingle, jangle, jingle. It's just, you hang it on your on your bandolier. This one is the clip is cracking a little bit, so it's on borrowed time. But the fact that this pen lasted through the trenches by J.A. Greeley, this is a trench pen. So you'd unscrew the back, and there was inside this little chamber were little ink pellets, which I don't have any of which I do not have any. And you'd take one of these little pellets, it's about the size of, I used to have Zoloft or some antidepressant that were that size. Oh, it's about the size of that wasn't it. It was the size of a pill that I gave my cat. Very tiny little thing. And you would take the thing out, the pill out, and you'd drop the pill into here, and then you'd add water and shake it about a bit or let it dissolve, and you'd have your ink, because it was powdered ink. And they were called trench pens because the last thing that your boy at the front would want to have to lug around with him, along with his rifle and his ammo and his crucifix and whatever else he had with him, was a bottle of ink. Of course, finding clean water in the trenches may not have been easy. Why is this skipping the way it's doing? I haven't used this pen in, could be even decades. I like the smoothness of it. It seems to me someone down the road tried to rub off the name, which is too bad. Another thing that's interesting about Swans is the fact that they take forever to unscrew. Of all the pens, this is the one that is the most turns you have to do to make the pen completely sealed. And I find that really reassuring, not just once or twice, but like 3 times. 3 rotations or something. Looks like this little stub pen, I have a stub nib in, which is how I like it. Really smooth stub in a stub nib. Look at that, it's even engraved SN, stub nib. This one has a cigarette burn or something in it. Big, monstrous nib. One of the first nibs I bought, I remember going to a flea market soon after I started collecting pens, and I bought this nib. And it was very, very fine, very firm, are relatively firm. And I just thought it was so funny that such a fine line would come out of such a big fat nib. This still isn't the pen that I wanted to describe. This is unscrew, unscrew, unscrew. This is another kind of a rare pen. I have a few, but this is one of their eyedrop fill pens. And there's something really neat about these as well. Again, you have to screw it a lot more times to there. Finally. Hopefully you remembered where you were going to write by the time you refilled it. I really like the oh, what is that all about? It had a did it have a ring on the top, or that could have been a medallion or something put up there at some point. This will describe the other weird thing about Swans. They have really long levers on a pen that doesn't need a really long lever. On the short pens, they made the lever smaller, shorter. But on the really long pens, and maybe they did it just for aesthetics. They wanted it to resemble the length of the clip or something. I don't really quite know. But the pin is way up here rather than way back here. So from the simple machine point of view, if the fulcrum is here rather than in the middle, you're providing, how does that work? The force of lifting the and pressing down on the sack is much lessened by the length of the lever on this side of the fulcrum. However, you're not lifting a boulder with the lever. You're depressing a little rubber sack, and you're also lifting up. This thing weighs a lot more, probably than the force you're pushing down. So, and it's close to zero on all of these, the force needed and the everything. But it's just very funny that the lever is so long. And when you think of the lever as a simple machine, the lever is sort of working backwards from how you normally think of a lever. As being functional. But when I look at this pen, I can't help but think that the lever is too long. That's just the way my brain works. It's hot wired into thinking that because I paid attention in 8th grade, and Mr. Lund, who was my teacher in 8th grade, impressed me. He also impressed my mother. My mother thought he was really cute, which he was, except at that time I wasn't paying attention to that. I was paying attention to the mechanics of simple machines, and the lever is one of those. Red. So those are my thoughts on a Swan pen. What other nibs can I just try here? Since there's no nib on this one. This deserves a stub nib too because of its short size, but the red of it, this is also because it's red hard rubber, it's heavier. Red hard rubber is heavier than black hard rubber somehow, and I think a firm nib might go in that one as well. I tried one of these pens out. Was it this one? Some of these other ones that I brought out had overfeeds as well. Maybe it was this one. And I said, oh my God, this is a beautiful nib. And yes, this is a beautiful nib. This is the nib that was similar to the pen that I sold Ted, except the one that I sold Ted could get about 5 times thicker than that. And but its fine was as prickly and delicate as this one. But because this isn't as flexible, I'm not afraid of breaking it, because the pen starts telling me, okay, Pierre, you're going too hard. Where the other pen I had didn't tell me that until way further down the thickness realm, and then it would whisper, that's enough, that's enough. And but if I was in a crowded room, I wouldn't hear it tell me that. So caused the fear. Why is this skipping? I think I asked that question earlier. See, a nib like this could go in that red pen. Slightly flexible, but it's the flex is very. It allows you to be aggressive with it. And this pen, this is for writing nasty notes. It's really amazing how much heavier this pen is than it should be. My mind already, I'm writing with this one and this metal one. I understand how that's heavier. I'm writing with all of these, and this big one, which does have an overfeed as well. Let's see, try it. It's nib. Yeah, this is another really nice nib. GWP. But this one is so much, it's heavier than this, I think. I have a balance. I keep wanting to write with it, and I can't. I'll fix that. I'll fix you. I'll put a swan nib in that one, and that'll make me. Does this one fit? It's funny, this thing is fatter than that one. This pen is fatter than this pen. But this, maybe it would. Let's try this out. You can see that I soaked this for hours. Just go in there. Just please go in. No, it doesn't want to go in. Another thing that's sort of neat about Swan Pens are their toothy, narrow-toothed feeds. Their the little fins that they have are many and thin. This nib is too fine for this pen. This pen needs a fat line coming from it. I'm sure I have a swan nib somewhere that'll fit it. Oh, dough. So, is that all I want to talk about? Have I brought... Oh, this is a weird... There are... This particular clip, I don't know if this is an original Swan. I think it is. Swan clip. This reminds me of the Habsburgs, the inbred Habsburg dynasty. Just like they keep inbreeding, and then they had that lip that has, 80% of their body weight is in their lower lip. Look it up if you don't believe me. It's the Habsburg lip of pendom. On that note, goodbye.